Right now, you're standing at that crossroads. The alarm rings, snooze or rise. The workout waits, excuses or effort. The dream whispers later or today. Here's what nobody tells you. Your daily choices aren't just habits, they're votes. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're electing a future of quiet regret. But when you master these 10 non-negotiable daily practices, you're not just building discipline, you're hacking time itself, compounding small wins into unstoppable momentum, becoming the type of person success has no choice but to follow. The research is clear. 94% of people abandon New Year's goals by July, but the 6% who succeed, they weaponize daily systems. A year from now, you'll trace every triumph back to this moment, to deciding that today's effort matters more than today's excuse. The question isn't, can you do this? It's, will you prove yourself right? Let's begin. Habit 1, the 5-second rule of execution. The moment your alarm blares in the quiet darkness, civilization's greatest battle begins, not on some distant battlefield, but in the neural pathways of your own mind. This daily skirmish between intention and inertia is where futures are forged or forfeited. Stanford neuroscientists have mapped what happens in these crucial moments. When a good intention forms, your prefrontal cortex lights up with purpose. And then you have exactly 5.2 seconds before your primitive brain sounds the alarm, flooding your system with rationalizations and escape routes. This biological reality explains why 95% of New Year's resolutions fail by February, why gym memberships collect dust, and why that brilliant idea you had last week remains unwritten. The chasm between inspiration and execution isn't measured in miles, but in milliseconds, those fatal seconds where hesitation takes root. Ancient warriors understood this principle instinctively. The Roman legions trained to move as one at the first trumpet blast, knowing hesitation meant death. Today's battlefield is psychological, but the stakes are just as high. Mel Robbins' research uncovered a startling truth. High performers aren't more motivated or disciplined. They've simply mastered the art of acting within that critical 5-second window. When Olympic athletes hear the starting pistol, they don't debate whether they feel like running. When Navy SEALs get the mission signal, they don't check their motivation levels, they move. And this same principle applies to every meaningful action in civilian life. The mechanics are deceptively simple yet extraordinarily powerful. When you feel the impulse to act on something important, whether it's getting out of bed, starting a workout, or making that difficult phone call, you must physically move within 5 seconds. Not 6, not after just one more minute. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Action. This countdown works because it creates what psychologists call a pattern interrupt, breaking your brain's default resistance. Consider how this plays out in reality. At 5:30 a.m., when your alarm shatters the silence, your body will manufacture a dozen compelling reasons to stay in bed. This isn't laziness, it's physiology. Your core temperature is at its lowest, your muscles are stiff, and your brain is still flushing sleep chemicals. The moment you hit snooze, you've lost the day's first battle. But when you launch upward on 5, you accomplish something far greater than waking up early. You train your nervous system to obey your decisions, not your moods. The applications multiply exponentially throughout your day. That report you've been avoiding, the moment you think, I should start, begin counting backward and open the document on 5. The salad you know you should choose over pizza, decide on 5, and the choice is made before temptation speaks. Every successful execution strengthens what neurobiologists call self-efficacy, the bedrock belief that you can trust yourself to follow through. David Goggins, one of the world's toughest endurance athletes, describes this as callousing the mind. Just as hands grow tough through repeated friction, your willpower strengthens through these daily victories. What begins as a conscious effort, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action, gradually rewires your basal ganglia until decisive action becomes your default setting. There's profound wisdom in the military maxim that the hardest part of any operation is the preparation. By the time Navy SEALs hit the beach, their success was already determined by thousands of small decisions to to train when exhausted, to focus when distracted, to continue when every fiber screamed to quit. Your life operates on the same principle. The quality of your days isn't determined by grand sweeping gestures, but by who wins these microscopic civil wars waged in the 5-second trenches. Tonight, when you lay your head down, set your alarm across the room. Tomorrow morning, when it sounds, remember, empires rise and fall on what ordinary people do in these unremarkable moments. 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3, 2, 1. The rest of your life starts now. Habit 2. The ironclad ritual. In the quiet hours before Tokyo awakens, there exists a sacred space where master sushi chefs perform their morning knife sharpening with meditative precision. This is no mere routine. It's a ritual so deeply ingrained that its absence would unravel the very fabric of their craft. Such rituals form the invisible architecture of excellence, the daily ceremonies that transform ordinary practitioners into masters of their domain. The power of ritual lives in our neurology. When neuroscientists peer into the brains of concert pianists during their morning scales or observe surgeons performing pre-op hand washing, they find something extraordinary. The brain has carved specialized neural highways for these practiced actions. The basal ganglia, that ancient part of our brain governing automatic behaviors, takes over what once required conscious effort. What began as disciplined practice becomes as natural as breathing, leaving the conscious mind free to focus on artistry rather than mechanics. Consider the case of world-renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma, who begins each practice session by playing a single perfect scale, not for technique. His fingers could execute these patterns in his sleep, but as a ceremonial gateway to the creative state. Or examine the morning routine of Pulitzer Prize-winning author Michael Chabon, who writes exactly 1,000 words before allowing himself coffee, rain or shine, inspired or blocked. These aren't productivity hacks. They're psychological alchemy, turning the lead of discipline into the gold of mastery. The difference between a habit and a ritual lies in its sacredness. While habits are things we do, rituals are things we are. Identity made manifest through daily practice. When Olympic swimmer Katie Ledecky steps onto the starting block, she performs the same sequence of stretches and breaths she's used since age 12. These movements contain no competitive advantage in themselves, yet their absence would throw her entire performance into disarray. The ritual has become part of her competitive anatomy. Creating your ironclad ritual requires understanding its 3 sacred properties. First comes alignment. The ritual must directly serve your highest purpose, whether that's creative output, physical mastery, or intellectual growth. Second is inviolability, protected with the same ferocity as a surgeon's sterile field. Third lives sustainability, simple enough to maintain through sickness, travel, and life's inevitable disruption. The magic happens in the repetition. When novelist Haruki Murakami wakes at 4 a.m. to write, when basketball legend Kobe Bryant took those famous 5 a.m. practice shots, when Beethoven counted out exactly 60 coffee beans each morning, they weren't just building skills, but constructing identities. Each repetition acts like a drop of water on stone, gradually carving canyons of competence that become the landscape of their lives. Your ritual begins today, not when conditions are perfect. Choose one keystone action, perhaps 30 minutes of deep work before breakfast, or reviewing your goals while shaving, or writing 3 morning pages in a leather-bound journal. Perform it at the same time, in the same way, with the same reverence each day. The first week will feel artificial. By month 3, you'll notice subtle shifts in your identity. After year 5, you'll look back at a transformed life built on the foundation of these daily ceremonies. In a world of endless distraction and shallow engagement, your ironclad ritual becomes the anchor of your days and the compass of your years. It's the quiet space where you meet your best self daily, where potential is forged into achievement through the steady hammer blows of repetition. The path to mastery has always been walked one ritual at a time. Will today mark your first step? Habit 3, the focus fortress. Deep in the archives of history, there exists a forgotten art practiced by the world's greatest minds. The art of building mental fortresses. Leonardo da Vinci had his isolated studio in the vineyards outside Milan. Marcel Proust wrote In Search of Lost Time in a cork-lined Parisian bedroom. These weren't eccentricities, but carefully constructed environments where distraction couldn't penetrate and genius couldn't help but flourish. Modern science now confirms what these masters intuited. When Princeton neuroscientists examined people working in cluttered versus minimalist environments, they found physical clutter competes for your attention, reducing your ability to focus. The visual cortex literally becomes overwhelmed, forcing your prefrontal cortex, the seat of willpower, to work overtime just to maintain baseline concentration. This explains why you can spend 8 hours at a chaotic desk and accomplish less than 2 hours of work in a properly designed space. The construction of your focus fortress begins with recognizing that willpower is a myth. Stanford's Persuasion Lab has proven through countless studies that people who appear disciplined are simply better at designing their environments. They don't resist temptation, they eliminate it. Like medieval castle builders who understood both architecture and warfare, you must engineer your surroundings to make focus inevitable and distraction difficult. Consider the case of Victor Hugo, writing The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Facing an impossible deadline, he had his assistant lock away all his clothes except a large gray shawl. The embarrassment of being seen in this ridiculous outfit kept him indoors and writing. Centuries later, programmers at Silicon Valley's most productive companies use variations of this same principle. Writing code on computers stripped of internet browsers, or working in buildings designed with focus pods that eliminate all visual noise. Your focus fortress requires 3 layers of defense. The outermost wall is physical space, a dedicated zone where only the work happens. Japanese author Haruki Murakami maintains separate offices for writing, revising, and correspondence. The middle wall is digital hygiene, tools like Freedom or Cold Turkey that don't just block distractions, but make them physically impossible to access. The innermost sanctum is ritual, the specific sequence of actions that tells your brain, now we focus. Whether that's brewing a particular tea, putting on noise-canceling headphones, or lighting a candle as Renaissance scholars did. The magic happens in what psychologists call flow triggers. When composer Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky entered his study each morning, he followed the exact same routine. Arrange his papers just so. Take exactly 12 sips of tea, then dip his pen. These rituals created neural pathways that catapulted him into creative states within minutes. Your version might involve clearing your desk with military precision, turning your phone to grayscale mode, or using a specific lamp only for deep work. The true test of your fortress comes not on productive days, but when motivation wanes. On those mornings when every fiber of your being resists work, your carefully constructed environment does the heavy lifting. Like a monk entering a cathedral or a surgeon scrubbing in, the very act of entering your focus fortress triggers professional mode. The writer Maya Angelou rented a sparse hotel room for this purpose. When she entered that space, her body knew it was time to create, regardless of how she felt. Begin building today. Identify one corner of your world to transform into a distraction-free zone. Remove everything non-essential. Establish a transition ritual as deliberate as a pilot's pre-flight checklist. Notice how quickly your mind responds to these cues. How effortlessly concentration comes when it's not fighting against a tide of digital and visual noise. In an age of endless interruption, your focus fortress becomes more than a productivity tool. It's a sanctuary for your best thinking, a time machine that transports you to an era when great work required great attention. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your life. What will your fortress protect? Habit 4, the strategic pause. In the silent spaces between thoughts where most people stumble blindly forward, masters of their craft plant a flag of conscious awareness. This is the territory of the strategic pause, that sacred gap between what happens to you and how you respond, where the entire trajectory of your life can pivot on a single breath. Ancient samurai understood this principle as skiki, the critical moment of vulnerability between actions when battles are won or lost. Today, neuroscience confirms what these warriors intuited. Your greatest power lies not in your reactions, but in your ability to widen that fleeting space between stimulus and response. Consider the operating room of Dr. Atul Gawande, the renowned surgeon who saves lives while the clock ticks mercilessly forward. In his memoir, he reveals the counterintuitive truth that the most critical moments in surgery aren't when his hands move with lightning speed, but those deliberate pauses where he stops completely to assess, recalibrate, and choose his next move with icy precision. This same principle applies whether you're negotiating a business deal, responding to a child's meltdown, or deciding what to eat when stress grips your willpower. The strategic pause transforms you from a puppet jerked about by circumstances to a maestro conducting the symphony of your life. The architecture of this practice reveals itself in 3 dimensions of time. In the immediate present, the 7-second breathing ritual used by Navy SEALs to maintain composure under gunfire becomes your secret weapon against modern stressors. When your boss sends that infuriating email or your teenager slams the door, these 7 seconds. Inhaling for 4, holding for 1, exhaling for 2. Work biochemical magic. Oxygen floods your prefrontal cortex while cortisol retreats, creating just enough space for wisdom to whisper above the shouting match of emotions. Zooming out to the hourly rhythm of your day, the strategic pause manifests as what Silicon Valley's most productive engineers call the blank screen moment. Every 50 minutes, they step away from glowing monitors to stare at an empty wall, asking 3 silent questions that separate the merely busy from the genuinely effective. This ritual isn't about time management, but attention stewardship. Regularly auditing whether your energy aligns with your intent. The answers don't require elaborate journaling. Often they arrive as bodily sensations, a tightness in the chest, revealing misplaced priorities, a surge of energy confirming you're on the right path. On the grandest scale, the weekly review practiced by icons like Warren Buffett transforms the strategic pause from a tactic into a life philosophy. Every Sunday, the billionaire investor sits in his Omaha office with nothing but a legal pad, conducting what he calls taking stock of the battlefield. This isn't mere reflection, but strategic repositioning, identifying which of last week's decisions moved him toward his North Star and which were reactive distractions dressed up as opportunities. The magic lies not in the analysis itself, but in the enforced stillness that makes it possible, creating space for patterns to emerge that remain invisible in the daily grind. The modern world conspires against this practice at every turn. Smartphones condition us to fill every interstitial moment with stimulation. Social media trains us to react instantly, and corporate culture glorifies perpetual busyness as a virtue. Against this backdrop, your commitment to pausing becomes radical rebellion. Like a deep-sea diver ascending slowly to avoid the bends, you must create decompression chambers throughout your day. Moments where you surface from the depths of doing to remember why you're diving in the first place. Begin tomorrow with micro pauses. Place 7 small stones in your left pocket. Each time you consciously create space between stimulus and response, move 1 stone to your right pocket. By day's end, those 7 transferred stones will tell a more important story than any to-do list. Within weeks, you'll notice subtle shifts. Fewer words spoken in anger, less money spent on impulse, more thoughtful responses that earn The strategic pause is the stealth weapon of those who operate at the highest levels, the barely perceptible habit that makes all other transformation possible. In a culture that can't stop talking, your silence becomes eloquence. In an era of instant reactions, your pause becomes power. Habit 5, the deliberate unplug. Deep in the Arctic wilderness, there exists a phenomenon so quiet it startles modern humans when they first encounter it. Absolute silence. No buzzing phones, no humming appliances, just the occasional crack of ice and whisper of wind. This is the environment our brains evolved for, not the constant digital barrage we now call normal life. The deliberate unplug isn't about rejecting technology, but reclaiming the neurological conditions that allow humans to think, create, and rest at their highest levels. Neuroscientists at the Max Planck Institute made a startling discovery when studying traditional societies untouched by digital technology. Their brain scans showed neural connectivity patterns resembling those of elite meditators, what researchers termed the default mode of the undisturbed human mind. This natural state, which our ancestors experienced daily, proves crucial for creative insight, emotional regulation, and deep problem solving. Your smartphone has effectively stolen this birthright, keeping your nervous system perpetually braced for the next notification, like a soldier in a never-ending war. The modern workplace worsens this crisis while pretending to solve it. Open office plans, combined with always-on messaging systems, create what psychologists call ambient awareness, a low-grade panic that someone might need your attention at any moment. University of California studies show this state reduces effective IQ by 10 to 15 points, equivalent to pulling an all-nighter. The most productive people aren't those who manage distractions best, but those who architect their lives to avoid them altogether. Novelist Jonathan Franzen famously writes on a computer with the internet card physically removed, while investor Warren Buffett still works in a paper-filled office where the most advanced technology is a landline telephone. Implementing the deliberate unplug begins with understanding your brain's natural rhythms. The first hour after waking is when your theta brainwaves are most active, the state associated with creative insight and emotional processing. Checking email during this window is like using a masterpiece painting as a dish rag. Protect this fragile time with the same seriousness as a concert pianist guarding their finger exercises. Let your morning rituals, whether journaling, exercise, or quiet contemplation, unfold without digital interference, and you'll notice ideas arising with unusual clarity. The evening unplug proves equally vital. Light receptors in your eyes, called melanopsin ganglia, detect blue wavelengths and suppress melatonin production for hours after exposure. When you scroll through social media in bed, you're not just wasting time, you're sabotaging your sleep architecture in ways no amount of morning coffee can fix. The solution isn't willpower, but environmental design. Try what neuroscientist Andrew Huberman calls the twilight reset, spending the hour before bed in dim amber light while listening to music or podcasts through speakers rather than a glowing screen. True mastery comes when you graduate from daily unplugging to periodic digital sabbaticals. Just as farmers rotate crops to let fields regenerate, your mind needs extended periods free from digital stimulation. Author Neil Gaiman famously checks into a remote cabin for months at a time to write, while LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner schedules thinking time blocks where no meetings or messages can intrude. You needn't disappear into the wilderness. Start with a Sunday screen fast or a quarterly weekend retreat. The first few hours will feel uncomfortable as your dopamine receptors recalibrate, but by hour 6, you'll experience mental clarity most people never know exists. The deliberate unplug ultimately asks a profound question. Who do you become when no one is watching? When no notifications interrupt? When your mind wanders without algorithmic guidance? In those uncharted spaces between digital inputs, you'll rediscover forgotten parts of yourself, the idle thoughts that spark innovation, the quiet intuitions that guide wise decisions, the stillness that makes life worth all the hustle. Your devices are tools, not masters. And the more you practice setting them down, the more you'll remember how to pick up your own life with both hands. Tomorrow morning, before reaching for your phone, reach instead for a window, a notebook, or simply the empty space of your own undistracted mind. The silence might surprise you with what it has to say. Habit 6, the physical anchor. Ancient warriors knew a secret that modern science is only now beginning to understand. The body speaks to the mind in a language older than words. When samurai prepared for battle, they didn't just sharpen their swords, they practiced precise breathing techniques to steady their hands and focus their thoughts. Today, Harvard neuroscientists studying elite performers have discovered these warriors were onto something profound. Your posture, breath, and movement patterns don't just reflect your mental state, they create it in real time through biochemical cascades that shape your decisions, emotions, and capabilities. Consider the curious case of the power pose, when social psychologist Amy Cuddy had research subjects stand like superheroes for just 2 minutes, feet apart, hands on hips, chin lifted. Their testosterone levels surged while cortisol plummeted. This wasn't just a confidence trick, it was physiology rewriting psychology. The reverse holds equally true. Slouch in your chair for 20 minutes, and your brain starts producing learned helplessness chemicals, making challenging tasks appear insurmountable. Your body is quite literally the control panel for your mind, yet most people go through life with their hands off the wheel, wondering why they keep crashing. The breath acts as the master key to this system. Navy SEALs confronting mortal danger don't try to think their way calm, they engage in tactical breathing, a 4-count rhythm that hijacks the autonomic nervous system. Inhale for 4, heart beats, hold for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. This simple pattern triggers the vagus nerve, the body's information superhighway connecting gut, heart, and brain to switch from fight or flight to rest and digest mode. Stanford researchers found this practice so potent it can lower heart rate by 20 beats per minute in genuine crisis situations. Your breath is the remote control for your nervous system, yet most use it unconsciously, like mashing keyboard keys randomly and hoping for coherent sentences. Movement patterns similarly dictate cognitive function. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman's lab discovered that forward walking motions activate the brain's navigational circuits in ways that enhance problem solving. This explains why historical geniuses, from Beethoven to Steve Jobs, conducted their best thinking while walking. The simple act of changing physical position, standing during creative blocks, pacing during phone negotiations, assuming a wide stance before difficult conversations, can dramatically alter mental performance. Your body's positioning sends constant updates to your brain about what kind of situation you're in, and thus what kind of thinking is required. Sit slumped like you're watching Netflix, and your brain obliges with Netflix-level attention. Stand like you're addressing the boardroom, and different neural networks come online. The face serves as perhaps the most surprising physical anchor. Psychologist Paul Ekman's groundbreaking work revealed that deliberately smiling, even when forcing it, releases dopamine and serotonin. Actors have exploited this trick for centuries. Now fMRI scans show why. Your facial muscles send direct feedback to emotional centers, meaning you can literally sculpt your mood through deliberate expression. Furrow your brow intensely, and within minutes you'll feel irritable, regardless of circumstances. Relax your forehead, soften your gaze, and a sense of calm follows. Your face isn't just for communication, it's a control surface for emotional states. Implementing physical anchors requires designing deliberate triggers throughout your day. When the alarm sounds, let your first act be placing 5 body parts on the floor: feet, knees, hands, forehead, resetting your nervous system through tactile input. Before important calls, spend 30 seconds in a power pose to summon confidence chemically. When stress mounts, splash cold water on your face to trigger the mammalian dive reflex, instantly lowering heart rate. Post-lunch, combat lethargy with 3 minutes of explosive movement to reboot cognitive function. These aren't just productivity hacks. They're ways of speaking directly to ancient survival circuits that bypass conscious thought entirely. The magic lies in consistency. Just as Pavlov's dogs learned to associate bells with food through repetition, you can condition your body to trigger optimal states through physical rituals. World-class speakers employ this by using the same pre-stage routine every time, not from superstition, but to create reliable physiological patterns. Your body remembers what your mind forgets, storing successful states in muscle memory where they remain accessible even under stress. For the next 7 days, become an anthropologist of your own physiology. Notice how slumped shoulders induce defeatist thoughts. Observe how deep belly breaths dissolve anxiety before it forms. See how walking meetings spark creativity that stagnant sitting kills. The body isn't just a vehicle for the brain, it's the control panel. Master these physical levers and you gain authority over your entire experience of reality. In an age where most are lost in thought, your physical anchors become the steering wheel for your being, guiding you through storms your thinking mind couldn't navigate alone. The samurai were right all along. Victory begins in the body long before the battle is joined. Habit 7, the deliberate downtime. The greatest paradox of productivity lies in what appears to be its opposite, the art of purposeful rest. History's most brilliant minds, from Darwin to Einstein, structured their days around a rhythm modern hustle culture has forgotten, that true breakthroughs emerge not in the grind, but in the spaces between. Neuroscience now reveals why this is so. When you step away from conscious effort, your brain enters what researchers call the default mode network, a state where distant neural connections form without force, where insights arise unbidden, where problems solve themselves in the background of awareness. Consider the daily rhythm of Charles Darwin, who divided his work into precise 90-minute bursts, followed by long walks through his garden. During these strolls, he carried a stone notebook, not to record forced ideas, but to capture those that came spontaneously. Modern analysis of his journals shows that his most revolutionary concepts emerged not at his desk, but during these periods of apparent. Similarly, composer Ludwig van Beethoven took midday walks through the Viennese woods, pockets empty of paper, forcing his mind to compose and retain melodies internally. These weren't breaks from work, they were the unseen labor where true creativity flourished. The science behind this phenomenon is both precise and profound. MIT's Attention Lab discovered that people who take regular breaks solve complex problems 40% faster than those who persist continuously. Functional MRI scans show that during showers or walks, the brain's default mode network activates with a unique intensity, making connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. The neurological basis of shower thoughts that feel like revelation. This explains why Google engineers report their best ideas coming not at their monitors, but in the cafeteria line. Why mathematicians solve proofs while gardening. Why writers break through blocks, not by staring harder at blank pages, but by stepping away. Deliberate downtime operates on 3 time scales, each with its own magic. The micro rest, 17 minutes of true mental disengagement every 90 minutes. Resets attention more effectively than caffeine. NASA's studies on sleep-deprived pilots found this precise interval boosts performance by 1/3, while Stanford researchers observed it prevents the gradual cognitive decline that plagues uninterrupted workers. The creative recess, 30 minutes daily spent in playful non-work activities, acts as cross-training for the mind. Nobel laureates are 22 times more likely than average to have serious artistic hobbies, because painting, music, or crafts activate different neural networks that later enhance primary work. The strategic detachment, a full day weekly without digital devices, rebuilds attentional capacity like deep sleep restores the body. Tech leaders from Arianna Huffington to Tristan Harris practice this digital Sabbath not as luxury, but as cognitive necessity. Implementing this requires overcoming cultural conditioning that equates busyness with worth. Start by scheduling rest with the same seriousness as meetings. Literal calendar blocks labeled thinking time or walk. Create physical rituals that signal to your brain it's safe to disengage. A particular chair for daydreaming. A playlist for mental wandering. A tea ceremony that marks the shift from effort to receptivity. Most crucially, keep an insight notebook to capture thoughts that arise during downtime, proving to your productivity-obsessed psyche that these moments generate real value. The resistance you'll feel, that urge to check email just one more time, reveals the habit's power. Your lizard brain knows conscious effort feels like work, but true breakthroughs often come through indirect routes. Like a farmer who understands crops grow between harvests, or a winemaker who knows fermentation happens in darkness, the masters of deliberate downtime trust processes they cannot see. Your mind solves its hardest problems when you're not looking, when you grant it the freedom to wander beyond the narrow path of focused attention. Tomorrow, when stuck on a problem, try the Darwin method. Step away precisely when instinct says push harder. Take that walk without headphones. Sit with eyes closed for 17 minutes. Spend lunch sketching instead of scrolling. Notice how solutions emerge from nowhere, how connections form without force. In a world that glorifies burnout, your willingness to rest strategically becomes not just self-care, but a competitive edge. The next great idea is already forming, not at your desk, but in the quiet spaces between your efforts, waiting for you to stop long enough to hear it whisper. Habit 8, the feedback loop. Legendary basketball coach John Wooden had a peculiar pregame ritual. He taught players how to properly put on their socks. This seemingly trivial act embodied a profound truth. Excellence isn't about grand gestures, but about creating systems that turn incremental improvements into inevitable results. The feedback loop is the invisible architecture behind all mastery, a disciplined process of measuring, analyzing, and adjusting that transforms practice from mindless repetition to deliberate evolution. Neuroscience reveals why this works. When you combine action with immediate feedback, myelin, the fatty coating that speeds neural signals, forms faster around relevant circuits. Princeton researchers found that musicians who practiced with real-time feedback improved 300% faster than those simply repeating exercises. Your brain isn't designed for blind effort. It thrives on precise information about what's working and what isn't. The most effective feedback loops share three characteristics. Olympic swimming coach Bob Bowman, who trained Michael Phelps, timed every lap to the hundredth of a second, creating what he called objective reality. Similarly, you need concrete metrics for your key activities: words written per hour, sales calls completed, minutes spent in deep work. What gets measured gets improved. Chess Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen analyzes every game, win or lose, the same day it's played. This immediacy capitalizes on what memory researchers call the reconciliation window, when experiences are most malleable. Spend 10 minutes each evening reviewing what worked, what failed, what single adjustment will you make tomorrow. Even world-class performers need outside observers. Tennis champion Serena Williams still works with coaches who spot microscopic flaws in her technique. Find your equivalent, a mentor, mastermind group, or even recording yourself to gain the external vantage point that reveals blind spots. The feedback loop transforms time from enemy to ally. Without it, you're practicing mistakes. With it, every action becomes data. Every failure becomes curriculum, and every day compounds into exponential growth. Start small. Pick one key metric to track this week. Review it daily and watch how conscious awareness alone elevates your performance. Progress isn't accidental. It's engineered through relentless feedback. Habit 9, the mindset reset. High above the Himalayas, where the air grows dangerously thin, seasoned mountaineers know to watch for a peculiar phenomenon called summit fever, that dangerous fixation on reaching the peak that overrides all reason, causing climbers to ignore storm warnings, depleted oxygen, and their own failing bodies. This same psychological trap plays out in everyday life, where we become so committed to our chosen paths that we forget to question whether the destination still matters or if the route still makes sense. The mindset reset is the disciplined practice of stepping back from the climb, not to quit, but to ensure we're still ascending the right mountain. Modern neuroscience reveals why this periodic reassessment proves so valuable. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly creating mental models of how the world works. Once formed, these models become self-reinforcing. We notice information that confirms them and unconsciously ignore what doesn't. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, and it's why smart people persist with failing strategies long after the evidence suggests they should change. The most successful individuals across fields don't possess better initial plans, but rather superior systems for regularly challenging their own assumptions. Consider how Amazon's Jeff Bezos institutionalized this with his day one philosophy, the insistence that the company approach each week as if it were just starting, unburdened by yesterday's decisions. This isn't corporate poetry, but a sophisticated cognitive tool. Research from Stanford's psychology department shows that organizations and individuals who build regular reassessment into their rhythms achieve outcomes 40% better than those who simply persist along their original course. The difference lies in what cognitive scientists term adaptive flexibility, the ability to pivot thinking when circumstances change rather than doubling down on outdated approaches. The practice unfolds across 3 time horizons, each with its own power. Weekly micro resets act like sonar pings, brief but penetrating checks on whether you're still on course. These are moments for asking uncomfortable questions. What's working so well it deserves more resources? What's failing despite honest effort? What assumptions about your market, relationships, or capabilities have shifted since you began? The simple act of formulating these questions creates valuable cognitive friction, disrupting the autopilot that governs most of our days. Quarterly meta resets. Dig deeper, examining the very framework of your efforts. Here you confront foundational questions. Does this path still align with who I'm becoming? Which skills that once served me have now become limitations? What painful truth have I been avoiding? Elon Musk's famous first principles thinking, breaking situations down to their most fundamental truths, exemplifies this practice. When SpaceX engineers insisted traditional aerospace materials were too expensive, Musk famously calculated the actual market price of the raw metals, proving rockets could be built for fractions of the standard cost. This is the meta reset in action, stepping back from industry assumptions to examine reality afresh. The annual macro reset is where you zoom out furthest, conducting what might be called a life edit. Like Oprah Winfrey reviewing her decades of journal entries to spot patterns and pivots, this is time for existential questions. Which relationships consistently energize versus drain me? When do I lose all sense of clock time? If I were starting fresh today, with current knowledge, what would I do differently? These annual resets often reveal slow-building realizations that daily routines obscure. The gradual misalignment between your present actions and future self. The mechanisms for triggering these resets matter as much as the practice itself. Physical environment changes, working from a new location, rearranging your office, create literal new perspectives. Seeking out disagreeable opinions, those that actively challenge your worldview, forces cognitive flexibility. Visualization exercises, like writing letters from your future self, provide temporal distance that highlights present-day contradiction. Neuroscience shows these techniques work because novelty triggers neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells, while routine thinking merely strengthens existing pathways. What makes the mindset reset so powerful is its paradoxical nature. In a culture that celebrates grit and persistence, it advocates strategic surrender. Not giving up on goals, but regularly questioning whether your current methods serve them. Like a master chess player who sometimes steps away from the board to see the whole game afresh, you develop the wisdom to distinguish between necessary persistence and pointless stubbornness. The practice transforms you from someone clinging to a plan into someone continuously co-authoring your own evolution, always climbing but never succumbing to summit fever's dangerous allure. Tomorrow morning, try a miniature version. Before diving into your routine, spend 10 minutes asking what you'd do differently if starting this project today. Notice how even this small reset alters your approach. Over time, these regular reassessments become your competitive advantage, not just in work, but in crafting a life that continuously evolves to match your growing wisdom. After all, the person who made your original plans wasn't as experienced as you are now. Why should their assumptions still govern your present? Habit 10, the legacy lens. In the quiet archives of Oxford's Bodleian Library, there exists a worn wooden desk where J.R.R. Tolkien penned the Lord of the Rings trilogy. What few realize is that Tolkien, then a middle-aged linguistics professor, wrote those first legendary words with full awareness that he might never live to see them published. He worked not for immediate reward, but as if speaking across centuries, a practice we've now lost in our age of viral moments and quarterly earnings. The legacy lens is the art of reclaiming this eternal perspective, of examining each day's work through the eyes of generations yet unborn, asking not whether it trends today, but whether it will endure tomorrow. Modern psychology confirms what the ancients intuited about this long view. Harvard's 85-year longitudinal study on human happiness revealed an astonishing pattern. Participants who made decisions with legacy in mind reported dramatically higher life satisfaction in their later years compared to peers who chased immediate gratification. Neurological scans show why. When we connect present actions to transcendent purpose, our prefrontal cortex lights up with heightened activity, releasing a cascade of neurotransmitters that enhance both creativity and perseverance. Your brain literally becomes its best self when playing the long game. The practice begins with what archaeologists call the museum test. Imagine your typical Tuesday preserved under glass for future generations. Would they see scattered browser tabs and half-answered emails, or focused work on something advancing human understanding? Leonardo da Vinci applied this standard even to private notebook sketches, rendering each anatomical study with museum-quality precision, though he knew most eyes would never see them. This wasn't vanity. It was a disciplined way to ensure his daily efforts matched his eternal standards. A more personal version emerges in what hospice nurses term the eulogy edit. Try writing your ideal eulogy, then compare it to last week's calendar. How many hours were spent building what you truly want remembered? Warren Buffett still keeps his childhood newspaper delivery ledger, not for nostalgia, but to maintain that young boy's understanding of how small, consistent actions compound into legacy. The billionaire investor reviews it whenever modern finance's complexity obscures timeless truths about value. The most potent tool is the time capsule principle. Before significant decisions, ask, if I sealed this choice in a vault to open in 2124, would I feel pride or shame? This single question filters out petty distractions with remarkable efficiency. When Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman struggled with research directions, he'd imagine explaining his choice to students 50 years hence, a mental trick that consistently revealed his true priorities. Implementing the legacy lens requires daily rituals that seem quaint until their power emerges. Morning intention setting shifts from what must I do today to what will I create that matters in decades. Evening reflection includes what did I build that will outlive me. Weekly you make legacy deposits, planting trees whose shade you'll never enjoy, mentoring younger colleagues who'll outpace you, preserving family stories for descendants you'll never meet. These actions wire your brain for generational thinking, what psychologists identify as the hallmark of societies that thrive across centuries. In Japan, master craftsmen practice shokunin kishitsu, the artisan spirit of leaving hidden signatures inside their works, knowing only future repairers will discover them. This blend of humility and eternal pride manifests differently across domains. Novelists writing for readers unborn, engineers building infrastructure to last centuries, teachers planting ideas that will blossom in minds they'll never know. The common thread is daily work performed with hands in the present but eyes on the horizon. The true magic emerges in how this lens transforms mundane moments. That tedious meeting becomes part of an institution's origin story. The exhausting parenting phase becomes future family legend. Even failures gain meaning as necessary chapters in your ongoing epic. Like Tolkien at his Oxford desk or Da Vinci in his Florentine studio, you begin sensing your life as part of an immense timeline. Your current efforts linking backward to ancestors and forward to descendants in an unbroken chain of striving. Place one symbolic object on your workspace tomorrow. A blank journal, a sapling in a pot, a photograph of your grandparents holding your infant self. Let it whisper through your days. This too is becoming history. In our age of disappearing tweets and disposable trends, your legacy grows quietly through daily acts of intentional craftsmanship. The future is watching through the long lens of time. What will it see you building today? We're wrapping up now, but your journey is just beginning. If you're ready to change your life, write it in the comments. I want to change my life. It doesn't matter how hard it gets. What matters is that you start. I'll read every comment, and the most powerful one will be featured on the channel. And if you want a daily punch of raw motivation, hit subscribe.